house rules. This is quite an interesting topic because there's a lot of different ones out there. Obviously, they're house rules. The example I was giving in our pre-show as we were chatting was Monopoly. I had no idea until just a couple of years ago that in Monopoly, putting money in free parking and collecting it or for a community chest, etc., and you'd get it when you give free parking, that's not an official rule, and I had no idea. And with a game like D&D, it being so much more complex, there's a lot of this stuff out there. There's a lot of third-party stuff, old editions, etc. So I'm excited to kind of get into the idea of like, not just sharing some of the house rules, because we're definitely going to be doing that, some of our favorites, but also just talking about the idea of why do we have house rules? And that's the question I want to start with is, why do we have house rules? Most of us have shelves and shelves of these books. And it's as if we look at it and say, yeah, but I want to do this. So, Shadane, can I start with you? Why do we integrate house rules into this game that already has tons of rules?
I would say one of the main reasons why you would implement a house rule is when there's like some aspect of play that you're trying to represent, and there's just like nothing that immediately comes to mind that could like properly capture what it is you're trying to do. And that's where a lot of house rules can come from. Another place is just pure convenience. Sometimes there's a rule that is so cumbersome that you might just want to change it or get rid of it entirely.
Was your choice
was that a shot at encumberment?
Yeah, maybe it was.
It was a not so subtle,
so cumbersome,
so subtle jab at encumberment. 1 point of strength equals 15 pounds of weight that you can carry, and not, guys, was there not a simpler way to do it? Like, the only reason why I don't have it out of my games is the fact that right now a lot of them are online, and BTTs handle that for me.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, it's interesting playing a video game like, let's say, Skyrim. I mean, there's a level of frustration with encumbrance. It's like, oh, crap, I can't carry that one thing I really want to carry. It means I have to get rid of this and this. At the same time, I can kind of see why it's there. Because otherwise I'd be carrying like 50 greatswords and, 3 dead horses in my backpack.
You gotta find ways of kind of limiting the amount that people can carry, having that amount of realism added into the game, while also kind of reconciling with the fact that that is a level of bookkeeping that some people might not just be into. And that's also another reason for house rules. They kind of tailor fit the game to kind of express mechanically things that those at the table want to be expressed mechanically, and kind of direct the play towards areas that people actually want to engage with, and choose not to engage with things they don't.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, there definitely is a possibility where players are like, well, how do I do this? And then, as you were saying earlier, you, as the DM, you start to kind of find those gaps that are in the game where like, oh yeah, there's really not that much about blank. I guess we gotta figure something out here.
Yeah.
In your game, why have you implemented certain rules? Maybe without going into what those rules are yet.
No spoilers.
Rule of cool. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's...
that was kind of where I was going. I do a lot of what Shadane was saying with, make it easy, make it more fun. I play a whole lot of different systems. So one of the things I'll do is I'll have one system is I really hate the way Fate handles initiative, but I really like the way D&D handles initiative. So I'm going to just borrow that. And, and I mean, it takes monkeying for Fate, but anyway, change things around so that I can make a more standard, I guess, initiative system work in Fate, because the popcorn system for initiative just drives me crazy.
The main benefit of house rules and homebrew rules is just to tailor kind of what the other person was saying. It tailors the experience of the table to what you enjoy. So if you are a very combat heavy table, you might implement a lot of complicated, granular combat rules. Whereas if you are a table that really enjoys role playing, maybe you add on an entire system about social encounters and winning over favor from an NPC, for example. So I think that's a reason. And I think another reason, which has also been said, is there's a lot of rules we just don't like.
Yeah.
So we just choose to cut those out and act like they don't exist. For me, I think those are the two main reasons.
I also think that the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I discussed this, the last time as I was on, this show, has a lot of alternatives that are frankly more interesting than the base rules, or that even add just like extra layers that you don't get from just the base rules. It's especially nice when you have a group that is, advanced, they all know the rules, to start throwing those little wrenches in there, like, okay, you guys know base 5e well, but what about if I add the climb onto a bigger creature and the overrun rule? What if I allow you to disarm your opponent? What if I make Revivify more engaging?
Ooh.
And I'll actually discuss that one later, so I'm not gonna get into it just yet.
I was looking for a critical fail table, and it's not in there. And being somewhat, I'd played the red box D&D as a kid. I didn't understand any of it. I was never allowed to DM. My friends didn't want me to. And then hopping all the way over to 5e, I was like, where's the critical fails chart? Like, when something bad happens, I want to know what happens, but it's not there. And so kind of that idea of, well, I'm going to pick and choose. And you start to kind of craft it according to your players. I think that's part of the key. For example, with encumbrance, we might just have a whole episode on encumbrance. I don't know. I guess I would use what is called like varied or variation encumbrance. I can't remember how it's worded in the book. But the idea, like, no, you can't be carrying 10 swords, right? Like, just keep it realistic. And so with my players, we don't weigh things. But one player, the one who is carrying the bag of holding, he knows that it's 64 cubic feet. And he's always, so how big is this vase? And because he wants to know, if I put in the bag of holding, how much space they're going to take up. Now, I'm not going to tell him, no, you shouldn't be writing that down because we're not worried about encumbrance. He wants to do it, go for it. Like, why not? Kind of thing.
Yeah. And speaking on that, there was like an entire other section of like mechanics and the like that I have like cooked up or like in playtest. And I have alongside like the core standard rules and like the house rules. But I explained to all my players, these sets are like opt-in. You choose whether you want to engage with this or not. And if you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. There are some that do, and some are just like, I'll pass, actually. I'm good. I'm just like, all right. But having that kind of flexibility, like additional flexibility to house rules can be really nice at a table.
Yeah. So maybe we'll use encumbrance as our segue to the next question of what rules or aspects of the game do you just tend to ignore? And I'm pretty sure most of us, is there anyone here among the five of us or anyone in chat where encumbrance, you take it into account, you actually abide by the rules? I'd be super curious to know if anybody actually does that. Not saying it's bad, because I think there are good elements to it. But anyone,
no.
What other? Yeah, I think John just predicted.
Yeah.
Well,
Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you're asking what other kinds of rules we tend to ignore, I have an example actually from a recent experience where you know the books that add permanent buffs to your constitution or intelligence, the
Oh
way of the silver
yeah,
tongue, so
yeah.
the way those work is you have to read them, I think, over a course of 40 hours of the course of a week or something like that.
Mhm.
Yes, yeah.
And I tried tracking that with my players, and I found out very quickly that was not going to work.
Oof.
They had no interest in playing library or bookkeeping. So basically what I did was after, a couple of days, you essentially learn and you get the bonus. So I think things, and that could be crafting too. I know that with crafting, you make a progress of maybe like 5 gold coins per day of the value of whatever kind of item you're crafting. So to make any kind of simple or common item will take literally days or weeks. So I think things that take a long time, we tend to shrink the time aspect of it. For me, those are a couple of things that stand out.
Uh, Very particular on I think in Strahd it's called the Tome of Understanding. A book that they can pick up that adds +2 wisdom. And a player in my group just found that in a high level place. 48 hours over 6 days that he has to study it. And the question that the other players thought, well, when are we ever going to have time to do this? Because everything seems like it's so urgent. Now, part of that is my fault, but I also think it's part of the story that, yeah, this is an urgent situation. You're not like, there's a big bad evil guy ruling the world. We're just going to hang out for a week and do not much kind of thing. There is an urgency in the story. At the same time, when they were asking about how are we going to do this, I kind of thought, we have never done downtime. Not even anything close. Maybe this is a way to kind of explore that idea and try a whole other aspect of the game that none of us have tried. And it might be a hoot, right?
Yeah.
So, not quite sure. But I totally see where you're coming from because same kind of thing. The idea of like, we don't want to like take a session to say, and you're studying. No, you're quiet over there. You're studying. You can't talk.
I feel like that is the exact situation in where house rules like pop open from the cloud, just like, hello, I'm here now, because just like you end up in what like otherwise would appear as like a lose-lose situation, just a no-win scenario, and just like, or I could just change the rules. I could just will this to be different. And most like previously stated, mostly for convenience and ease of play.
Right. Yeah, and it kind of keep things moving, and you have 3-4 hours with these friends once a week. You want to keep them engaged, and the maybe it's kind of the I can't think of the word for it, but the feeling that like I just want them to come back. Please come back. Right? Like, I want you to come back next week. So yes, we're gonna do that because that'll be way more fun. Sure. Yep. Okay.
I think the last session that Short Quest Long Rest recorded, we came across an interesting situation where we had to ask ourselves whether wild shape could be dispelled with the spell Dispel Magic, because it specifically says that it dispels magical effects. Now, if you Google this question, one of the answers that'll come back is that Dispel Magic only works on spells. So at the table, we all as a group kind of had a brief conversation on it, and we opted that because Dispel Magic states that it dispels magical effects, and I particularly asked the druid in the party because this would affect them as well, do we allow, because you want to cast Dispel Magic to dispel this enemy druid's wild shape, do we allow that? Understand that it will affect you.
Yeah.
And we opted to allow it to be used for that purpose. So it becomes another counter for druids and wild shape in our game.
Cool.
That is super cool, and you bring up like a very important point, that a major importance in kind of rules in general is consistency of play. That the rulings for things in the world must have some form of consistency. That if it applies to this situation, it will apply to situations like it in the future the same way.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And just like was just said, if it works on the player's behalf, it can work against the players too.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the most important conversation to have when we're putting in some of these rulings. Like, I mean, the Dispel Magic on Wild Shape is a fantastic example of that. We have to be prepared for the, both ways on that one.
You got to present it to your players. Definitely can't spring something like that on them. It's something that you have to say, hey, this is going to come up. How do you feel about this? And there's got to be room for discussion there as well.
It was one that was kind of sprung upon us because it was a player initiating. And we actually had to pause for a moment and be like, hey guys, we're going to cut this out of the recording. But let's all Google this and come to a consensus. And then, okay, ready? Start, continue, let's go. So yeah, do try not to spring home rules, home-ruled rules onto people, homebrewed rules.
Yep.
But in instances where it's almost unavoidable, where it's kind of like, hey, like, this is a really good question. Sometimes you need to make those rulings, and at a later date, if you need to readdress them, like, do it at that time.
Of course, you can't think of everything at a time. Ideally, you want to figure it out for a session 0. Or, as we've talked about on the show before, session 0 doesn't always have to only be the very first session. You can hold it multiple times throughout the campaign as well. What about spell components of value? What do you do for that?
Anything that has a spell component cost, for me, I make my players have to actually go out and seek that item. And then say they've sought it once, like a diamond worth 300 gold pieces or something. From that point on, after they've found it the first time, just every time they use it from that point, they'll just use another 300 gold pieces. So they don't always have to go back to the magic store and get another one, but they will always have to pay the component cost.
Ah, okay. That's a good way to do that.
I think there are instances where components like that have a specific value, they have that value because they have scarcity within the world. Not every jewelry store you go into, or not every town you go into is going to have a jewelry store. So not every town you go into is going to have platinum rings for something like warding bond. So those scarce items, those diamonds, rubies for non-detection. I think that's rubies if I'm wrong. Sorry on that. But that scarcity allows you to do some very, very interesting things. Like I find it interesting that, if they find it once in a store, they can then, burn that 300 gold to find it again. To me, diamonds are incredibly precious. And I, in addition to just allowing them to be bought from some stores, would almost make them a quest item in some instances.
Yeah.
Like maybe there's someone in town who's fallen on hard luck and they have some very fancy jewelry from their grandmother that they're trying to sell, and part of that jewelry set happens to be a diamond of the appropriate size. Well, now you have an opportunity for the party to, buy it from this person, to steal it from this person. Maybe they don't even realize that they're not holding on to costume jewelry and they're trying to sell it for like 10 gold. Does the party like let them know what's going on, or they allow that person to kind of suffer? There's a great deal you can do around those items that have a cost.
I'm interested that actually at least in 5e, in the pre-written modules campaigns, that they don't include those specific kinds of loot more often, like more conscientiously. Because it's there, it's in your player handbook. You'd think that they'd say, hey, by the way, this wizard has, a glass vial with a little skull in it or with an eyeball, and then the warlock would be like, I need exactly that thing, right? Like, I'm kind of surprised that they don't just sprinkle that in there
Yeah,
already.
It's a area of playing like additional like world building and adventure design that is somewhat lacking, mostly because 5e kind of hand waves like a lot of the components with there's a component pouch and there's the spellcasting focus. Yeah, they are like, if you're a wizard or any spellcaster, a part of your starter kit is, and you have the thing that lets you cast magic that without having to worry about anything doesn't have a cost. Which I agree with Josie and with John as well, that it's an area of play that I thoroughly enjoy exploring. Even when it comes to like the scarcity thing, I'm currently running a Westmarch, and we're at the end of we're like nearing the last chapter, and so everyone who could cast Revivify was just like, I'm gonna go out and purchase a diamond worth 300. I'm just like, all right, but then like it gets to the point where I'm just like, this is what like the jeweler has no more diamonds worth
They're out of
300,
stock.
but they do have one worth 600. No, I don't think it was things. So it was like 150 platinum if someone wanted to pony up, because there's nothing saying you can't spend a diamond worth more. You just got to pony up the coin for Revivify.
Sure.
That's good. Yeah, that's a good faucet. It's a good faucet to control the power creep of spells. Joel, you were talking about looting and how you're surprised there's not more within the source books about that. There's actually a couple of really good products on DM's Guild. I know one of them is called like Hammond's Harvesting Handbook. Another one is called it's Monster Loot. There's a whole collection of them.
Yes, I've seen those. And I'd be remiss to not plug my own, actually. I do have one on DM's Guild called Valuable Components for Spellcasters, or Valuable Materials, I think. And it's basically, I got sick and tired of looking through all the books for all the valuable components. So I just made a document that has all of them there, sorted by level, sorted by class, available at DM's Guild.
And allow me to toot Joel's horn, is recently gone silver.
Hey, congratulations.
It finally
Nice.
did. I had it as pay what you want for a long time, so it's had like 1,500 downloads, but only 106 purchases or whatever. That's okay. I'm okay with that. Jade, I wanted to ask you then, because your background is more with older editions of D&D. Are there things that, let's say, from those old editions that you're almost, a bit surprised that they've kind of disappeared?
So, thinking about the original rule sets and stuff that has gone away, I'm shocked that people don't love Thaco. No, I'm not. I hated Thaco. We talked about, kind of in the pregame, the concept of getting maximum hit points at first level. That was something that was always a house rule for me. And we were talking, like, oh no, you do that in D5 now, or 5e now. I was like, do you? I knew that. Sure. I've played 5e, I think, twice, so.
Completely fair.
And one of the other things that, and this is something that, again, that I've always done that I'm kind of surprised isn't more usual. I think I might be jumping ahead to the next topic, but talking about spell components, I always tailored, whenever I've run a module, I tailor the loot to the party. There's nothing like getting a halfling-sized suit of +2 plate mail with no halflings in the party.
Sure.
You know what? My fighter's a half-orc. Guess what? That armor just became half-orc-sized. The magic user villain is carrying a pouch of spell components. Oh, and did you need such and such? Conveniently, guess what's in the pouch?
Yeah.
So it's maybe it's fudging the rules, but why make things harder? This is about having fun.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I think that's what I've been doing too. Every now and then I like to throw in something, from the book. Let's say the party doesn't have a bard, and yet they come across an instrument. There's still at least one group I play with. They're always like, oh, I wonder if, and you can see them kind of trying to figure out how they can go about using this, or it basically turns into gold at that point. They know they can sell it for whatever amount, kind of thing.
And in that situation, I tend to have parties that will carry the magic loot, and this is wonderful. And then the minute they need the space, the loot's gone, and they're carrying, whatever it is they just found, the new sword, the new shiny.
Right. Yeah.
This is how loot gets pollinated throughout the kingdom.
I know, as soon as I said that, I was like, oh, that was a terrible instrument to use as an example, because loot.
Yeah.
One of my favorite examples of a bit of loot that one of my party members is actually they bought it, so I guess it's not technically loot. It's a glass ball, like a crystal ball, but it has a little mechanical goldfish in it that's just constantly tapping on the glass, just wiggling back and forth. And our Warforged druid actually picked that up and has been carrying it around for a while.
Fun.
I just think that's adorable.
It is adorable.
It is adorable.
Yeah, it's fun to cater those things to the party. But Jade definitely made a nice segue there. Are there house rules that are so common that we think they're in the actual rules?
Ability checks do not get critical fails or successes. And this is something that everyone seems to homebrew. Like, we all see stories on Reddit of the bard was gonna get us all killed, but then he rolled a natural 20 and we all survived, and he succeeded the check to slay or orlay the dragon. Or, here I was about to face obvious mortal peril if I wasn't able to lie my way into this place, and I rolled a natural 20 on a deception. Or I rolled a natural 1 or a critical fail and got found out. And I find it so interesting that we're all so trained from the combat side of things to be really excited about natural 20s and critical failures that it doesn't even really occur even to veterans to be like, oh, wait, I shouldn't be terribly excited about that because that's not an automatic success. I could still be failing right now.
Yeah.
So I have a question about that. It's a two-part question. If they ask for something that's impossible in your mind, do you let them roll? And then if you let them roll, if they get a nat 20, what do you do?
For me, I run my ability checks much to the book. They do not automatically crit succeed or crit fail. But in cases where the thing that they are attempting is actually impossible, I don't even call for the roll. And if I do end up in a situation where it's slip through the cracks, and then only after I've already given the go ahead and the roll's been made, I'm just wait a second, actually I forgot about something that's not gonna work. Oh, they've already rolled, and that's a nat 20, isn't it? A lot of pressure on the DM in those moments, peer pressure especially, where it's just man, literally everyone's around me super excited about this. I don't want to ruin their fun. You know what, you plucky bard? You did seduce the dragon. Shucks.
So
Now get ready to take bludgeoning damage.
Oh God. Oh my. Oh dear Bahamut.
Yeah, that's actually a good way to go it. Where in situations where a success does you succeeded in doing what you wanted, it's not really what you needed at all, and so you can have it be succeeding backwards instead of the converse of failing forward.
Oh, so I think that a large part that plays into this is obviously, as Shadane was saying, rule of cool. Definitely a huge factor there. The second factor is going to be what makes more narrative impact. And third factor is that yes and or that yes but. Mm-hmm. I strongly recommend any DM look up improvisation. you don't even have to take an improv class, but even if you're just like aware of the mechanics, it's going to make your DMing so much stronger because, yeah, okay, somebody rolled a natural 20 to do something impossible, but there's always complications. Whenever you're reading a book, the heroes might succeed at something, but they succeed at a cost. If you're reading Mistborn, the group might succeed at one thing, but they only succeed because the villain's attention is elsewhere. And now someone else, some other part of their plan has gone awry because no one was paying attention to that. They were focusing on this natural 20 that's happening over here. There are certainly ways to handle it, but I think that if a player is going to like Babe Ruth it, like, watch this, guys, I got this, and they roll a 20, let them have it.
I think I would add a third one there. Yes and, yes but, and I think for me I'd say, but there's also a no but.
Oh yeah.
No, you did try to pick the lock. You rolled in at 20. No, that didn't work. But instead, this and this happens. Because I think it's good for players to know that, there are things that are out of their reach. There are things to aspire to that they will, a good player will, write it down in their notes. And then a few sessions later or like a year later, be able to say, hey, remember that treasure chest that we couldn't open, back in that one dungeon? I bet I could open it now, kind of thing. Let's go see what's there.
I was going to say, one of the mechanics that I've borrowed from one system and applied to others is Fate has the concept of, I think it's complete success, partial success, tie, partial failure, complete failure. And you can tie that into, what does a partial success look like? Oh, maybe you got the safe open, but the guard heard you. So the guard is coming. You can't get everything out of the safe that you want. Tie something like that in. And it does really interesting things for kind of spicing up, oh, you got a 13 and your target number was a 12. So yeah, you win. No, let's make this interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like another big thing, which I kind of, this is slowly segueing into a conversation about ability checks in general, but a major thing for me in the games that I run is that when an ability check is done, knowledge is gained of some sort, whether it is success or failure. The party has to get on the other side of it with more knowledge about the situation than they had prior.
So what about when they roll like a 2 on Arcana? Here you are, you're standing at this statue, there are runes here. Okay, I roll Arcana. See what I understand. They roll a 2. How do you take into account that they rolled so poorly and yet they are going to gain information?
The information that they end up gaining is like in that case, considering I have like extensive knowledge of like the world, the information that they would end up gaining would be mostly false, but with a kernel of truth in there that someone else is like, okay, you, the wizard, you heard that, because they like explain to us like, oh yeah, and they like retell the story of what like the information is like, roll an Arcana check for me and see if you were just like all of what you said was wrong. But, and then you can continue on the narrative and the situation that way. The party ends up moving forward. The person who failed, cripplingly failed, and if not for the fact they had like a team behind them, would have been sent in the complete wrong direction.
Thank you for that. I kind of put you on the spot there, Shadane. But as you were talking, I was like, yeah, exactly, right? Like, they don't have to always learn the correct information. If you do a survival check, I'm looking up at the stars to see, and the moon to see which direction is north. When you roll a 2, well, you think it's that way when it's totally that way. And that is all about the yes and, yes but, or no but, right? Those 3. Jade, sorry, what was the system you were talking about from this game called Fate? It's something about complete success. There were different degrees. What was that called again?
Yeah, so Fate is the name of the system. There's Fate Condensed, Fate Core, Fate Accelerated, the 3 different versions of it. But they all kind of use this idea of complete success, partial success, the tie, and then partial failure and complete failure.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I'm going to have to look into that.
I just want everyone who's been here tonight just take away one important thing from like all of the various house rules that we have posited, and it's just the reason of why we implement them in the first place. It's always to try to improve the atmosphere around the table, whether it's trying to achieve a certain style of play or avoid other areas where that are less savory, and just promote a better atmosphere at your table. That should always be the goal, not only in the rules that you decide to implement, but also in the type of games you run. We do this for fun. Let's keep it fun. An additional thing is that a lot of the rules that we have posited here, a lot of the house rules that have come about are the product of a wide community full of minds that are thinking of constant additions that they can add to this game and the hobby that we love. The developers that made the core set are just, at this point, a small sect of the people who are out here making additional content and rules and mechanics to supplement and make the longevity of this awesome game that we all enjoy continue on, and pulling from that those who do so for inspiration alike is something that should be encouraged. And yeah, so try your hand at making a house rule. See how it goes.
Okay, good last word. Thank you, Shadane. Well, I'm going to say thank you to all of you. Thank you for once again sharing your experience and wisdom. Thanks, everybody. Have good nights.
Bye.
Right.
Until next session, may all your 20s be nat.